What family secret was finally spilled in your family? That my parents had to get married. They always told us they got married in 1961, but it was 1962, 3 months before my sister was born. What's amusing is that my father was an accountant who was insanely fast with math. Whenever he was asked how many years they'd been married, he'd be off by one. My mother would correct him through clenched teeth, and then my father would nod and agree. After my mom died, I found out the real story behind my parents' marriage. She came to my father's country to visit some of her relatives, met my father, and after just 1 week she asked him to marry her so she could stay in the country. My father accepted because he had nothing else and his parents were pressing him to get married already. But the highlight of the story is that over time, the two of them fell in love with each other. Their love only grew and they were really happy together. My mother spent her last days very ill, and she would accept only my father by her bedside. He swears to this day that she was an angel sent from God to take care of him. I am shocked that they got married just like that, out of the blue, and ended up loving each other so deeply. I can only hope to have as good and loving marriage as they had. About a month ago, my mother-in-law's 88-year-old sister revealed on her deathbed that her husband's best friend was actually the father of all 4 of her children. Her husband was an abusive, great a jerk by all accounts. Well, everyone was shocked. No one was saddened by this news. My grandmother recently died. She was famous in our town for her amazing cooking or catering, in particular her turkey dinners. Notably, her gravy was absolutely amazing. So delicious. She had a heart attack several years ago, and her near-death experience convinced her to share some of her secret recipes with me, all except for her gravy recipe. When she died this spring, I was going through her pantry and found an entire bucket of KFC gravy mix. She was literally using KFC gravy mix as a base to make her incredible gravy. Huge scandal. Found out my uncle is actually my brother. My mom had him when she was so young that my grandparents raised him. When my paternal grandfather died, the federal government reached out to do a state funeral. He'd been career Army and a colonel, so we didn't question it. Then the funeral came and they went all out. Huge procession, people showing up who are really big names, like heads of departments, senators, retired senators, people from the CIA and State Department. It was nuts and we were all super confused. Turns out he was a key dude in the OC during World War II, and when the OC splintered into the CIA and Secret Service, he went the Secret Service route. He wasn't on White House detail, but instead worked in a covert office that dealt with counterfeiting and currency. He went blind when I was a toddler and retired from the Army. For whatever reason, he told no one about all his covert work with the OC and Secret Service, and the only person who knew my grandmother was sworn to secrecy and never told anyone. My father grew up thinking he was just a colonel working on base. Only after his death were we given all sorts of cool stuff like publications by him, lectures given by him, and all kinds of things from various things he did and was known for. All I knew him as was a blind old man who was perpetually smoking, drinking, and being a crotchety bastard. Turns out he was a bad mother ducker and all, but none of us knew. When I was 5 years old 1988, Santa Claus left a Nintendo on our front porch. It was wrapped in newspaper, and my parents had no idea who gifted it to us. My dad, particularly, tried to figure it out. He was always suspicious that it had been a family friend. It was by far the best gift of the year, and we played it all the time throughout our childhood. My dad died in 2004. Last Christmas, my mom explained that she was the one who had bought it and surreptitiously placed it on the porch. My dad really liked to be in control of things and had forbidden the purchase. She knew better. She didn't tell a soul for 30 years. Thanks, Mom. My uncle served in Vietnam. While over there, his troop found a baby that had been orphaned or abandoned. They aren't sure. My uncle was shipping back to Australia soon and wanted to adopt him, but my aunt said no, they'd only been married about 4 months when he was drafted. So while I don't agree with my aunt's actions and generally don't like her as a person, I can understand why she said no. My uncle's troop found a family to raise the baby, And that's the story the whole family knows. The secret is that my uncle and some other guys from his troop stayed in contact with the family and the kid, sending them money every month to help raise him, and then to help him go to university, and eventually helped him and his adoptive family move to Australia in the last 90s. My aunt and the rest of my family had no idea all this time. It only came out when my aunt and uncle divorced in 2017 and she had a forensic accountant go through their bank records. She worked at a bank for like 40 years and always noticed the money missing, but his reasons were always justified. Since we all know now, my uncle has introduced some of us to the guy and his family. They're all really lovely people. My grandma didn't drive. I thought she couldn't, but it was just never discussed. One day when I was maybe 7 or 8, I'd been trying to get anyone to drive me to the store for candy. We were visiting my aunt and uncle. Grandma lived with them. They had bit o' honey at the local store, which I could no longer get at home, but no one would take me to the store. Finally, I said I'd just ask Grandma, and my cousin chimes in with, "Grandma can't drive." "Oh, you bet your sweet ass I can drive. They just don't let me." Grandma had overheard and she was in high dudgeon, but that's all that was said about it. And my aunt finally took me to the store, so I forgot about it. Years later, when I'd just gotten my license, I asked my mom what was up with Grandma not driving. She explained that during Prohibition Grandma bootlegged alcohol from moonshiners. She was very successful at it. She was so successful at it that when the moonshiners were finally busted, even though the revenuers never caught my grandma, her license was suspended by the state to never be reissued. Later in life, she was told she could petition for it back, but it came with an admission of guilt or some such. She told them to go to hell. Relative did not just fall off a bridge with her baby, she jumped. It seems obvious in hindsight, but they reported it differently both in the news and to younger family members. Oh, another one. My mom's side of the family are farmers. One particularly dry summer, we were playing around with fireworks in a pasture and accidentally lit it on fire. Luckily, there was an industrial hose attached to the well nearby, and we were able to turn it on and douse the flames before it got out of control. We didn't tell anyone until 10 years later, when it came out to my parents and my aunt and uncle. My uncle, who farmed the land, burst out laughing and told us that it must have been not long after that he was at that property and obviously noticed the burned grass and askew hose. He put two and two together, but didn't say anything because he figured kids were being kids, and we probably learned our lesson. Not really a family secret. This happened in the 60s or 70s. One of my mom's second or third cousins shot and killed his father. The father was a raging alcoholic and very abusive to his wife and the son, especially when he was drunk. The father came home drunk one night, started abusing the mom, and son had had enough and shot his father, killing him. The guy spent a few years in prison for maybe manslaughter or something. I think he lives a fairly normal life now. My parents used to grow weed in the basement when my siblings were little. I was a baby at the time, or possibly not born. The secret came out when my dad sent a photo of my sister standing happily in front of a bunch of weed plants. She asked about it in an email, but he ignored it. My dad told me all about it though. Apparently he was between jobs and was visiting family in California. One of his family members was growing it, so he ended up getting some cuttings and brought them back to New York. He hooked up some electrical wire so he could steal electricity off the power line without being detected, and so there wasn't a large power bill for the lights. They grew weed and tomatoes, which they told the kids what everything was. He'd sell it in bulk to some guy at an airport he flew at recreationally. He used that money to move to a new state and start a business there. My very Catholic grandma and her very Catholic brother both had multiple children with their spouses, which included, by random chance, one gay son each, but them each being gay was a secret in each family and never spoken about. My family always suspected the cousin was gay but never said anything for fear of outing them. My grandma was sure her brother would have a problem with his son being gay. Her brother was sure she would have a problem with her son being gay. One day when they were in their 30s, the secret broke with brother confronting sister. I need to tell you, we think your son is gay. Oh, of course, we've known for decades. And I hate to be the one to tell you, but you know your son is gay too, right? Oh yeah, we've always known. Turns out nobody in my very Catholic family had any issues with accepting their homosexuality, and everyone is supportive and keeping secrets for no reason. I just always thought it was funny they hid something everyone already knew for like 25 years. My parents retired about a year and a half ago and suddenly became the most open potheads of all time, like showing off their joint rolling abilities to me and everything. I'm in my 30 seconds and never knew they smoked the devil's lettuce until the day my dad retired. It suddenly makes sense why they didn't punish me to bad when they caught me smoking. For me, this was a happy family secret to be spilled.